Good evening, Senator.
This is what we worked on.
How are you today?
Yeah.
See that? You need a mask?
Yeah. No, I'm not.
Most of it, actually.
I don't know, but you're.
But tonight we're going over.
So, we haven't started the work session.
No, sir.
Good.
We ran over on the policies.
Junior.
No, it's policy.
I thought you were proud. Now that it was adjourning.
How was it?
Heard the policy.
Yeah,
Us three are on the.
they stayed over Sunday.
Love to have
You
you.
and Mylan and
Don't be
Back on them and Jeff.
And I talked to her yet.
Uh-huh.
Gonzalez, they're early.
Yeah. That's how they.
This is what the policy committee was working.
You'll receive an updated version.
Okay.
That's prior to this evening's change.
Right.
I have a form here. I guess 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'd like to call the Board of Public Utilities Commission work session. F4, to order. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Mylan,
Here.
Mulvaney Henry,
Here.
Bryant. I'll come back. Gonzalez. Here. Groneman,
Here.
Haley.
Haley.
Stay here.
You do have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I have do I hear a motion to
I
approve
move to
the
approve the agenda.
amended
Amended
agenda?
A second.
Thank you. A motion to move, the amended agenda has been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Mylan,
Aye.
Mulvaney Henry,
Aye.
Bryant,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Hi.
Groneman,
Aye.
Haley.
Aye.
That motion carries, and for the record, I note that all members are now present.
Thank you, Angela. I don't know if there are any board updates, any meetings that you all have attended that you'd like to report on? Hearing none, do you want to defer your updates to the thank you? Super great. Get right into the personnel code policy review.
So last time, I think the policy committee met, through the personnel code and it's been updated. And next step after that is to move that policy update to the.
That's correct. Does everybody have a copy? Personnel code?
I brought hard copies for.
I need a hard copy. Mine.
Yeah.
That. That's the marked up version.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I reviewed this and I did not have any additional comments, edits on it. But I obviously defer to the remainder of the board for comments, edits, questions regarding the red line version of this. Everybody give them a couple minutes to get their.
I didn't have.
You put it up on the screen.
Last meeting, I did not get updated.
Like you said.
First one, did we make it all the way through this?
Yeah,
Yes,
Yeah.
sure.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Mary.
It reflects what we talked.
Which would you like on the other end of the
Track changes. Please. If anybody has any questions about the revisions, I'm sure the policy committee of Mr. Bryan, Mr. Groner, and myself will be happy to answer questions from all the board members. Senator Haley.
Thank you, and let me say, I really, in reading and now rereading it, I'm pretty impressed with the finessing of the language to make it more clearer in various areas for our personnel
Thank you, sir.
we have. Is that your wordsmith?
No, sir.
That we, okay. One question I had, is regarding, chapter 4, the residency, which, I think a much cleaner version, with the strict language that's out, it makes it much cleaner by way of definition. I did note that in the original, policy, though, it appears there was, what repercussion there might be, or repercussions there may be for the violation of the residency, and I don't know how or if that is reflected in the amended version.
Page
If-
10,
If there is,
bottom line.
Employee shall be terminated for failure to meet the conditions and qualifications for continuing employment.
thank you, Mr. Bryan,
You're welcome.
and thank you, Chair Henry.
Yes, sir.
I have no further, observation.
Bob, did you have anything for the policy committee on this?
Well, I haven't got a chance.
Oh, okay, sorry about that.
That's not true.
This one was a late add to the agenda.
Madam President, it looks like all the corrections that we had discussed in the previous meeting, so I think it looks good to me.
Yeah, I listened to your discussion in there, this meeting.
Okay. So I know we've got other business to get to tonight. Rather than taking this up tonight, do we want to give Bob an opportunity to go through the red line version? And then we'll bring it up potentially for vote at the regular session, the second meeting of the month?
Yeah, then he could discuss, he'd bring up any
Absolutely.
concerns he has at that point. Yeah.
Is that okay with you, Bob?
It's fine with me.
Okay, sounds good.
Be on the regular session agenda for next week.
Yes, sir.
I have one comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dumovich.
One comment.
All right, next item. Thanks, Andrew, you're doing this. So we're starting off our 2024 budget. There will be, if we got on the calendar, some events. Lori's, either Lori's now or us now, one of the two. All the upcoming meetings of the board. What those topics will be. So we normally start out with fuel and purchase power, and then we get into the rest of others. Andrew?
All right, well, thank you, guys. Yeah, every year we kind of start with the fuel and purchase power budget workshop, and so this year's no different. So good afternoon, thanks for having me. Fuel and purchase power really makes up the vast majority of the energy rate component that we see on our bills. As part of the quarterly ERC process, as well as the annual budgeting process, financial planning really goes through internal data, forecasted data. We use our E7 software platform. We really attempt to forecast the projected generation and purchase power activity across the entire year. As part of this process, we run hourly calculations for the entire year. So in the next few slides, we'll just briefly touch on some of the aspects that go into that analysis. So also as part of this methodology, we attempt to forecast load projections for the upcoming year as well. The two processes are really independent of one another, just due to the manner in which SPP integrated market works. But we do both of those processes. So really on the load side, we look at a number of factors, including historical monthly billing data, trends, weather data, those types of activities. This year, like every year, it's different than the previous year. And so that's due to numerous reasons, including economic changes as well as weather conditions. So from a consumption standpoint, the residential usage is down about 5% over the first eight months of the year compared to last year. That decrease is likely largely driven by lower heating and cooling degree days than we've seen over the same period last year in 2022. So heating degree days are down by about 15% over the first 8 months of this year compared to last year at the same time. While cooling degree days are down about 3% over that same time period. But cooling degree days are still about 6% above normal, from normal conditions. The residential class is really the most susceptible to weather conditions because heating and cooling make up such a large percentage of the overall load requirements of a residential household. The smaller commercial classes are flat year over year, while we're seeing larger classes are up about 8% year over year. Next slide. So really, since weather conditions play a relatively important role in the overall load conditions, locally, but also regionally, I wanted to provide a little context as to what we monitor, how it looks, and how we track it. And these are really driven by heating and cooling degree days. And so, as you can see, I've tracked 2015 to 2022 on this chart. And really what this is saying is that since 2015, we're about 2% below normal in heating degree days and about 3% below normal in cooling degree days. And so effectively, you can see 2018 and 2022 both have heating degree days and cooling degree days above normal. Those are the 2 years that we've had the highest residential load across this time period. And so just so you can understand a little bit of what heating and cooling degree days are and how it works. So really, it's based on a mean temperature of 65 degrees. So for example, if the mean temperature on a given day was 70 degrees, it would have a 5 cooling degree day. In other words, the mean of 70 degrees is 5 degrees warmer than 65 degrees. And so therefore, they would allocate 5 cooling degree days to that. If the temperature came in at 60 degrees, they would allocate 5 heating degree days to that. And that's how they would allocate distance from normal, right? So if it was 90, then it would obviously allocate more cooling degree days than if it was 70, those types of things. And that's where you range from normal to abnormal in these conditions. Next slide.
So
Go ahead.
why is this information important?
So heating and cooling degree days drive a lot of our load conditions, right? And so it drives more of our load conditions, especially in the residential class, because up to 40% of your heating and your residential load is driven by your heating and cooling needs. Obviously, from an electric utility, more of it's driven on the cooling degree days side, because we have more air conditioners, all of those run on electricity. Where on the heating side, we do have electric heating customers, but there's also gas heating customers, right? So as those gas heating customers move more to heat pumps and those styles, more of that will move to the electric side. But those are what moves the needle a great deal on the residential side. On the industrial class side, the larger class size, the heating and cooling doesn't move the needle very much because much of their processes are driven on motors and furnaces and different activities that aren't associated with the weather conditions themselves. But you can see a big difference on the residential side. From a resource and market perspective, we look at generation-specific items such as output capability, fuel price forecast, storage outage rates, those type of things. And so when we're looking at market pricing expectations, which directly impact the resource output, we look at how that impacts both the fuel needs as well as the revenue that would be generated from the SPP market sales. So for example, if we expected market prices for a given day to be $17, we wouldn't expect Nearman operations to run because that's below their operating cost to operate. If we see market prices expected to be $30 in the market for that day, we would expect Nearman to run near its peak limits. So therefore run near its max. And so those are the difference. Every dollar in market prices will dictate what resource runs and how that moves our needle, both on a fuel consumption standpoint as well as a purchase power activity standpoint. Next slide, please. So this slide is pretty busy, but it really reflects the cost of our various resources and load during the 12 calendar months of 2022. A couple of key things I want to note on this slide. First is our load cost, which is the big dotted line. So load costs were substantially higher in 2022 than we've seen in since the beginning of the market, with the exception of February 2021. February 2021 was well off this table here. But as a year, on a general rule, 2022 was the most expensive load conditions we've experienced since beginning the new market. Natural gas pricing and wind output has really become the theme of the energy markets over the past couple of years, and that appears likely to remain the predominant market forces over the next decade or until other changes occur, either on the load or the generation side. I'll just point out a couple of things on the other lines, just briefly. On the thermal units, the cost being reflected is the fuel only cost and does not include labor, O&M, those type of activities. While the purchase power or renewable generation is really just the purchase power agreement, doesn't include any transmission costs or other activities that would be associated with bringing that power to market. This is really just the cost of bringing one more megawatt hour onto the system. And so, each of these, the costs are just indicative of the next megawatt of production. But each resource has different attributes. They're located in different areas, produce power at different times, and therefore they have different value and risk characteristics. And therefore, really, the goal of our resource mix is diversity to help, mitigate some of the different risk characteristics, whether it be government regulation, fuel price volatility, those types of things. So just briefly, down there towards the bottom of the chart, Nearman 1 fuel averages just above $20 per megawatt hour. Cimarron Bend is slightly above $20 as well. Our Alexander Wind comes in just over $30 per megawatt hour. Our WAPA and SPA, which is our government hydro contracts, that generally come in the $30 range as well, depending on water flows and so forth. And then Smoky Hills comes in just over 40. The other blue line is our Dogwood line, and that's really driven by natural gas prices. And so you can see in 2022 that the natural gas line or the Dogwood cost is substantially higher in 2022 than we've seen in previous years. Next slide. In this, sorry. Oh, there you go. Sorry. In this slide, I'm just comparing load costs for 22, 23, and 24, projection for 24, as well as the Dogwood operating costs for 22, 23, and projection for 24. Since Dogwood is a natural gas unit, it obviously moves and varies based off the natural gas pricing. So the red lines are the 22 lines you've just seen on the previous slide, and therefore you can see the load costs are substantially higher, the dotted line, than both the blue line, which is 2023, and our forecast for the green line, the 2024. And so that was largely driven by natural gas prices being very high in 2022. The blue line is 2023 year to date, and so you can see natural gas prices are substantially lower from Dogwood there to there, and therefore we've seen lower load costs year to date. The green line is what we're projecting for 2024. So we are projecting natural gas prices to be up slightly in 2024 compared to 2023. Load costs are going to be slightly higher in 24 compared to 23, although we do expect summer conditions and pricing to be similar to what we've experienced so far this year.
Back up one slide.
Sure. Yep.
So I think it's also important to know that some of these contracts are coming up for renewal. Hydro contracts coming up.
So we've recently extended the SPA government hydro contract. We did have to change locations of where that transmission comes from. It currently comes as a displacement agreement through Black Hills Corp to FG to us, and now it's going to come through, I'll say WAPA to Mean up in Nebraska to us. But really, the thing about the government hydro agreements are they're 10-year arrangements and are based off of, again, our full requirements cost, and therefore whatever the cost of the Army Corps of Engineers, what gets passed on to us, the off-takers. So us munis and so forth, have access to that government hydro. And so it's been a pretty good deal on that front. We do have a dogwood agreement that comes due at the end of 2027. Or sorry, not dogwood, Smoky Hills, sorry. Smoky Hills comes in at the end of 2027. That's our oldest wind facility, and our most expensive wind facility. But that comes due in 2027. The other agreements are farther out than that.
So I just went there to, because I don't know, we haven't talked about it in a while. We have started our generation assessments study, the plans for that. And we've also started working on our integrated resource plan. So those things are having or about to be kicked off. I mean, we've already got an agreement. We're bringing in Laughing Beach to help guide us through that process. We will be scheduling meetings with the board someday, once we kind of get a little bit farther down the road, provide an update, and then just seek some input from the board as to where we should be going with some of these. Look for that to come sometimes later.
Yeah, so the integrated resource plan is really just one, asking for opinions in terms of what preferences that you as a board or community have and how we direct future progress on the generation side and so forth. And so you'll get to see, I'll say, different planning tools in terms of what different things are forecast to cost now and down the road, and how those different resource mix will impact various things at the utility in terms of how much capacity accreditation are they expected to receive, how much generation output are they expected to receive, what are the fuel costs or expected purchase power agreement costs, those type of things as we look down that road. And so it's really meant to say, hey, how much do we value different attributes and what those attributes mean? Because just like all of these resources here, we have a really broad group of resources today. When you look at the IRP, there's no resource type out there that you're going to say, this is the killer deal. Everything else is way behind. Everything has pros and cons, from a renewable attribute to a local resource. Everything has different challenges and things to it. So it's going to be one of those things that everybody has to kind of decide what makes the most sense. And again, this is why we kind of have a stack of variable different resources, because each one has different value propositions. Next slide. So really here, again, talking about natural gas, it's always a major driver to what market conditions look like. We do have a pretty diverse fuel mix, therefore we do have some gas units, some coal units, some renewables, but gas really drives the market conditions within SPP today. And so really we had a pretty good decade of stable natural gas prices up until 2021. And so coming into 2020, we had natural gas prices come in at $2.11, which is near a historic low. But then it nearly doubled to $4.06 in 21, over $6 in 2022. And then we had a precipitous drop at the end of 2022, with natural gas prices expected to average about $2.58 here in 2023. We do expect, from the previous slide, you can see that we do expect a slight increase in natural gas prices in 2024. So we do expect it to go into the low threes in 2024 as an average. Last year at this time, when we were sitting at this meeting here, EIA was projecting $6.24 as we go into for 2023's year. And so we're sitting at 258. So you can see how far off the projections were from the EIA group, getting to the government. The SPP integrated market prices are down about 42% over the first 7 months of 2023. That's really, again, driven by natural gas prices coming down. Therefore, all the market prices are coming down as well. Dogwood production volumes, they're expected to be about 7% higher in 2024 compared to what we believe to be 2023 full year actuals, and about 75% higher than we expected the 2023 budget is reflecting. Wind energy. Wind energy is the #1 resource type in all of SPP. It accounted for about 38% of all the generation in SPP in 2022. While coal was second, coming in about 33%. SPP has about 35,000 megawatts of wind resources as of the end of the year, 2023. SPP set a wind penetration record of about 89%. That means wind made up 89% of the total generation in the footprint at that given time. And there's times it could exceed 100% if you have the ability to move it outside of the region better. In those times, it usually gets curtailed for those reasons. Kansas has about 48% of its total generation coming from wind resources today. That's the number one fuel type in the state of Kansas. And obviously Kansas is one of the highest wind producers in the country. Next slide, please. So here's just the forecast that I was talking about, the EIA graph. This is really comes from the natural gas pricing. Again, you can see how low it was in 2020, starting to move up and spiking in 2021, 2022 climbed above $6 as average. And then there at the end of the year, right after this presentation last year, it fell precipitously to the levels that we're seeing today. So again, we're averaging somewhere in the mid twos this year. Next year, again, we generally expect a slight bump as we go into the colder months, just because natural gas demand picks up in the colder months. And then it's average in the low to mid threes across next year. Next slide, please. So as we look at the different accounts that make up purchase power activity, the first one is purchase power energy activity. So this is purchase power energy is really all the wholesale activity, both the sales and the purchases with SPP activity. This is by far the most volatile of all the accounts, because it includes all the activity, again, both sale and purchases of all of our resources and our load. So really the daily expenses with SPP fall within the purchase power energy account, while the daily revenue figures are moved to the wholesale revenue account. So in 2024, the forecast is that the purchase power expenses will likely exceed the share of its wholesale revenue figure by about 7.7 million. Purchase power energy is expected to climb by about 3.5 million, and approximately in line with the expected full year 2023 actuals. Purchase power renewables, these are really made up of the contracted purchase power agreements with our renewable fleet. So these are the agreements that we have in place with our government hydro, our wind contracts, our hydro contracts, those type of things. But we are expecting a budget decrease of about 12% or 2.5 million. This is primarily due to lower output levels offset by some inflationary pressures. Purchase power capacity. So some of our purchase power agreements do have capacity agreements with them. And so with this, we do expect the budget to fall by about $2 million over the 2023 budget. So are seeing lower overall capacity costs. Purchase power transmission. This is not our internal transmission costs. This is the SPP transmission cost to serve our load. So in 2020, we became a network customer, which has helped, our flexibility in terms of how we schedule transmission, but also reduced our cost by about 25% over the previous version when we were a customer only. We do expect the 2024 budget to come largely in line with where we're at in the 2023 figures today.
Andrew,
Yeah.
on the purchase power renewables, the second line, that decreased by about 12%. Is that mostly going to be in the wind area or?
It mostly is in the wind area. So we are seeing higher curtailment levels and just lower output levels in general. We do expect hydro levels to be slightly lower as well. At this point, we're not forecasting overly high, I'll say, snowpack or hydro flows. And so we expect a little bit there, but most of it will come from the wind side.
So are they continuing to build new wind farms across Kansas?
They are. It's not at the pace that we had seen, I'll say, previously, but yes, new wind farms are still coming online. Some of the reason it's slowed more than anything is the price of wind has really been climbing over the last few years. So it had gotten really cheap. And now it's substantially more expensive than it was a few years ago. And so it has slowed down, but we are still seeing activity in the wind market for sure. We are starting to see a pickup in solar as well, but solar is not near as predominantly here in the state. I mean, we're talking less than 1% today from a solar output compared to where we're at in wind.
Was that cheap because of the subsidies and now the subsidies are going away? Or was that just cheap power?
So it was, yes, it was cheap because of subsidies. The subsidies aren't going away. They're every bit there as they were before. I think, I'll say, some inflationary trends and different things have driven those costs up. And so some of it's just, I think, inflation more than anything else, but the subsidies are fully there. Yeah, we're up into the $28 a megawatt in subsidies on the wind side, so it's still pretty good.
So from a trajectory standpoint, solar's not going to be, you anticipate. I saw they're building some new solar farms not far from here. But if they're not as productive as wind has been, I mean, are we not gonna add them further to the portfolio, or SPP not be doing that, or?
I actually anticipate that solar will be the biggest growth engine on the generation side over the next decade. So I do expect SPP, wind, Kansas, all of those things to increase solar at a faster pace than any other fuel type. It's just starting at such a lower number, right? We have such a small number in Kansas today. But one, it gets both ITC or PTC tax credit associated with it, which helps immensely. But I do think that the way the capacity accreditation is going to work going forward, that you will see more solar output, because solar matches much closer with our load profile, right? Daytime, we consume more juice than nighttime. And so therefore, I do think solar will be the bigger driver. And so solar, a lot of it is wind was sitting really low and solar was still really high. And so it was really tough to take solar at $80 a megawatt hour when you can get wind for 20, right? And so now they're much closer in price point. So solar is still higher than wind, but again, it comes at a time when prices are generally higher and your load is higher. So I do think solar will likely win the day going forward. So I do think within Kansas as well as SPP, and Kansas really has a really good solar profile, a top 10 state solar profile. I mean, we're top 5 wind profile, so it's hard not to put wind in, but we are a top 10 solar profile. So us, Colorado, New Mexico, we're all great solar profiles. So I would expect solar to continue to drive, and over the next decade, it'd be the #1 fuel source, at least growth wise over that decade. So
That's helpful to know. Is that, what you just said, is that anywhere, part, you mentioned that line item, what solar is in any part?
it is not, it is not. So again, we only have the 1 megawatt of solar, community solar today. And obviously we won't have any solar for 2024. But as we look out at the IRP, that's going to be one of the big drivers that are in there in terms of the function of what that price is expected to be. And as we need new generation, either based on load growth or terminating contracts, solar will be one of the things that will have to be explored as to whether that's the value that you go with or you go with another fuel source. But that will absolutely come in that IRP that Bill discussed.
We're also looking at some of the federal funding too. What possibility is there?
So
God, I hope so.
So there are some things there that we'll see what comes down the pipe on some of that stuff. That's a small scale solar type programs from a federal thing that we'll see what happens. But that would be more local type of solar, right? Because solar does take up a large land mass, right? So it generally takes up 4 to 5 acres per 1 megawatt. So it's really land intensive. So again, to replace, we got a 200 megawatt wind farm. To replace that much wind, you're talking thousands of acres of land, right? So it is a little more land intensive in that nature, but is it really stackable as well, right? So you could put a 5 megawatt resource here locally, whereas you couldn't put a 100 megawatt resource locally. But the nice thing with solar versus wind is I couldn't put any turbines up here in Kansas, just wouldn't work. They're too big. They're, air requirements and restrictions and all that stuff. So solar is such a stackable deal that you can do it in different blocks depending on how much you want, where you want it, those type of things. And so it is a good resource, and I do expect it to be a big driver going forward in SPP as well as Kansas. So
we're not looking to replace current generation just yet. I don't know that the payoff is there for that. What I am interested in is solar pieces that may have some community value, where there's dollars coming back for community benefit, where BPU can direct those dollars toward community-based projects that can make a difference in this community. So those are the questions I'm asking, and what I'm hearing, what I'm reading, that's still a possibility.
It is a good possibility, and we're trying to work closely with the KHRC, the Kansas Housing Resource Corp, and those type of things. Again, the feds have to pass down money to the state, and the state has to say, hey, I want you to have some of this and so forth. So we're hopeful that we can move a couple of those things in our direction. And so we are working with the state on trying to get some of that done. And those are pretty good projects and really better projects than I've seen elsewhere. So I'm crossing my fingers a little bit, but we've been working on that.
Closer, and if it becomes closer to possibility, we'll be coming back to the board to say, here are dollars that also community dollars that come with this. Here's our ideas on how we spend these dollars in our community. What type of community impact will that make? So,
Yeah, and so with respect to going and seeking, some of these dollars. I know that obviously Andrew is working closely with folks on it. Bill, I know you're involved in it as well. Have we looked at hiring outside consultants that this is in fact what it is they're doing? This is what they do for a living? We hire consultants for lots of things around here.
Haven't pulled the trigger yet, but I have had some conversation, and I need to tell you.
And we do have some work through the KMU that also is contracted with outside parties that share information down to its members as well. So
Specifically, I don't know, and I shouldn't assume that you're not a grant writer. But
that would be a fair assumption.
You do a lot of things, Andrew, but I don't know that you do that. And
Or would have time to do it.
or would have time to do it. And so, these are, this potentially is a lot of money that can be used in this community.
Right.
I know that the UG, has a portion of this as well. But I would like to see, this utility for utility specific things, possibly throw some resources
So,
and professionals instead of,
let me follow.
overburdening our staff.
let me follow up. So our first effort was to go out and just take a look at what's there. So if we can start targeting certain funding opportunities, then that's where we can take a grant writer and release that grant writer. Okay, here's the things that we've seen that make sense for us, because grant writer is going to come in and say, okay, tell us where you want us to focus our attention, so trying to get all that out of the way first. I think we're getting close. But so let us have an internal discussion.
Yeah.
Very soon, very soon.
Thank you.
Is there any money out there, or is nuclear, the small nuclear generation plants, have they kind of gone by the wayside now, or are they still?
I'll say they are still bubbling around. There is no new small nukes that have come online. There are plenty of discussions in various places about small nukes. I think the biggest challenge is making sure the cost stays in line with where cost expectations would be. And so I don't know, again, it's a big nuke, but if you look out there on the East Coast, out in Georgia, they just built a new nuke here over the last 2 years. Anyway, it took about 4 times as long and about 8 times as much money as they projected. And each time it was a cost overrun, they were like, should we continue or should we stop? And so it was astronomically expensive. Again, some of the thought behind the small nukes is that potentially it's cost effective The government though has to, kind of define what the rules are, so that these contractors can build those things in a way that is cost effective. But again, that is still a talking point that's out there. I don't think it's gone away. I think we need some baseline generation, again, not us necessarily, but collectively as a grid. And so therefore, those things can provide a lot of that baseline generation. So it is still out there, just nothing's getting built at this point. I think I'm on the purchase power, all right. The purchase power transmission, again, really is our SPP transmission cost to serve the transmission needs of serving our load. And so those are the SPP transmission costs, I think. Renewable energy certificates, so we receive these RECs or renewable energy certificates associated with our renewable resources. And so therefore we sell it, quite a few of those RECs to the marketplace. Again, it's not the energy side, it's the other piece, the non-energy piece that just said it's green. And we sell those to the street on occasion, and we do expect another $400,000 in REC sales in 2024. We are seeing higher sustained pricing in this market in the $2.50 plus range. So that's a good deal as well. Other purchase power activity, really these are expenses associated with FPP operations expenses, MRO compliance, some other service providers. We expect that budget to remain in line with the 2023 full year budget and full year actuals. So for a total purchase power budget, we do expect it to fall by about 4% or about 2.4 million in 2024. Wholesale sales are expected to fall by about 3.8 million compared to the budget, but largely in line with where we expect full year 2023 actuals to come in. The good news is we're currently expecting a mild reduction in the 2024 full year ERC rates. So we do expect the full year 2024 ERC rates to come in about 4.1 cents, which is about 9% lower than our full year 2023 ERC rates. So that's a good thing. Everybody will be paying a little bit less on ERC rates than they did last year.
Well,
Or
and
this year, sorry.
and with the rate increase, that was part of that, was that we were gonna see a building that bucket. So ERC to help minimize the change to our ERC.
So we do have a reserve fund now, right? Which is driving up the ERC, but we took out the capacity payments, which is pushing down the ERC rate. And so effectively, when you take, let's take the first 5 months of 2024 compared to 2022 rates, we're looking at less than a penny a day increase, so about 0.6 100ths of a cent type thing is where it actually comes in. About 20 cents per month is where it comes in at with these lower ERC rates compared to where we're at in 2023. That's all I have. If they have some questions.
I do. Andrew, first of all, thank you for getting the presentation to us a week ago Monday.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate that. So I've got the approved 2023 budget here because I appreciate the percentage decrease and all of that stuff, but the total purchase power budget for 2023 approved by this board was $55.6 million, right? And so we expect that the total budget will decrease by 2.4 million. So is the ask this year roughly 53.2 million?
So we expect, 53.2 million.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And so the 9% reduction on the ERC, the 4.1 cents. What did we anticipate the ERC to be in 2023?
I don't know.
Anybody? But when we did it for 23?
So probably in that ballpark, probably about 4.2. I don't have the number in front of me, but we probably were expecting about 4.2.
That's without any reconciliation. So where exactly for 2023 are we at in reconciliation? I understand that we run behind, I get that, but
So yeah, so in 2022, over, I'll say those quarters, with higher gas prices and so forth, we did get behind on the ERC reconciliation, so we were under collected by, 10 plus million, 12, $13 million, whatever it was. And so through 2023, we expect to be effectively fully caught up in the ERC reconciliation process. So essentially zero under collection, moving into 2024. Roughly, right? I mean, you're never gonna be at zero, but it's gonna be close.
so potentially zero under collections is where we'll start ish in 2024.
I say zero, obviously, we just ended 2020, the third quarter, I think it's 600,000 if I recall correctly, but effectively.
We under collected.
We under collected by, but 600,000 is as close as we're ever going to get on any quarter ever,
Understood.
so
It's negligible.
it's negligible.
Sure.
Because we were talking, 5, 6, 7 million that we were working on
Right.
before on these quarters, so it's negligible in terms of how much it moves the needle, it's a tenth of a cent or whatever it is, so it's negligible moving in, and the fourth quarter, I guess the third quarter date, is looking really promising, and so we do expect to be likely fully recovered at the end of the third quarter for that shortfall, so.
Okay, and so I thought I heard you say that the natural gas prices play a large component, right,
They do.
to the ERC and the volatility of the ERC.
They do.
Okay, and so last year EIA was expecting natural gas to be 624 this year, which in fact it's much lower than that, right?
Yep.
And we're expecting it to be just a tick up in 2024. So we expect it to be not as volatile as we have seen it in recent years. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and so we're coming in at negligible under collection and the volatility we're not expecting. So the rate increase has resulted in large amounts of a cash reserve fund that we're saving for a rainy day when potential volatility comes back.
So yeah, obviously the reserve fund is going to be collected over a 5-year window, right? So we collect $1.5 million
I thought it was a
a
3-year
quarter.
We only have a 3-year.
Well, the rate increase.
But it would take a while before it would fill the fund.
So yeah, we got a 2-year rate increase, right? But we have effectively to get to 27 million on our ERC reserve fund. That's about 5 years to collect that.
Got it.
And so about $1.5 million a quarter is what we're looking at collecting. Again, we put some safeguards in there, right? If it jumps by a certain rate, then we don't collect and those type of things. But yeah, it's meant to collect. It's 120 days over that 5-year window, assuming rates are relatively stable on that side.
Okay. That's all the questions I had, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I was just wanting to understand how. I know that the collection hasn't really began in earnest of that amount, but I want to see how it brings down that volatility. We were asked to fund something and I expect to see the.
Well, I don't think it's gonna bring down the volatility.
Of the ERC, well, it'll help balance it for residents, so that we don't sit there and say,
I hear you.
yeah, I know.
So
You know what I'm saying? right
Yes.
now.
But my question for that was, go back in time when you were in balance and then gas prices spiked.
Yeah, it's to take away that.
That's all a whole different amount of ERC adjustments we have to go through, so. And we could, you can't necessarily forecast that, all the time correctly, so. This will help smooth out those peaks, over time, but.
We'll see.
So we did build in safeguards, right? When it moves up by a certain percentage, we do not collect that. And when it moves up by a certain percentage more, we actually we take the funds from the ERC reserve fund to fund that under collection. So it is one of those things that will hopefully help smooth that, but the goal is obviously to collect, days of cash, so the whole entity is covered in a better manner, so.
So last year, I went to ACPC. This is still something we were brainstorming over. And I gave a presentation on market prices, fuel costs throughout the region, and just as you told me, from all over the country. And one of the questions that I asked is, okay, we're getting ready to introduce this in our cost of service, show of hands. How many of you guys have some type of added reserve for fuel purchase power market price adjustment? Everybody in the room that I can remember said, hey, we've been doing that for a while. You guys are just not getting around to doing it. So brought that back to, our group and said, we still need to go through and make sure we're setting our values correctly, make sure we get the program set up correctly. But this is just something else that we're a little bit late to the party on, and I'm glad it's we went through it through a part of our cost of service, and I'm glad that the board approved this, because I think it will serve our public interest going into the future, so.
Well, if it can stabilize the bills so that we don't have those swings every quarter, that to me is what I'm picturing a win looks like, is that our customers don't wonder, why is my bill keep jumping around so much?
Well, if you look at the larger paid customers, look at the wall swings that we pass.
I look at the residents, because
One thing I would ask, that question at the end, and thank you very much for being prepared for it, Andrew. I certainly am not up to speed on what was in last year's budget, except by pulling out the budget book and looking at it while we're talking about this in real time. So saying, hey, it's gonna look like it's gonna decrease a little bit. I would like those figures in all of the budget presentations we're gonna see, please. So in 2023, the board approved millions of dollars. And whether it's gonna increase or decrease, I'd like to see that as part of the presentations we're gonna see, if that's possible.
Can you send me an email of this?
I sure can.
Capture exactly
I
what.
betcha. Yeah, no, that's just, thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Andrew, I just have one real quick question. This with the crazy weather patterns that we had this year, is just projections going to become more and more difficult to make?
So I don't know.
Obviously, it was almost 90 degrees on October 1.
Yes. And so over the last 5 years, if you look at the last date of 90-degree weather, we've been late September, early October, the majority of those years. And when you look previous to those 5 years, it had rarely occurred.
Right.
So that is somewhat normal. In terms of, we're starting to see that more occur, or feels like more occurrence. But when I look at, 2015 to current across all of those years, right, we're actually milder winters and milder summers when I look at that whole period.
Okay.
So as a whole, we have not exceeded our normal across that time frame. So I don't know that it says anything necessarily outside of, each year is independently different from the other one, right? So 2022 was higher in both cooling degree days and heating degree days, the same as 18 was as well. But we had multiple years that one was high, one was low, and flip-flop. So across the spectrum, we haven't necessarily seen a big divergence from what normal was before to what normal is now.
Yeah.
So every year feels like it's hard, believe me. So, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Got a motion to adjourn. Second?
This is Jeff, I second.
Motion to adjourn has been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Mylan,
Aye.
Mulvaney Henry,
Aye.
Bryant,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Groneman,
Aye.
Haley.
Uh,
That motion carries. The work session is adjourned.